Hello learners, this is Habiba with UGC Net Paper 2 Education Unit 3, Learner and Learning Process with the subtopic Personality Theories. Today we are going to learn about Max Wertheimer's Gestalt Theory. Max Wertheimer, born on 15th April 1880, died on 12th October 1943, born in Prague, Czech Republic, was a psychologist, father of Gestalt Psychology. Introduction. Max Wertheimer was an Austro-Hungarian born psychologist who was one of the three founders of Gestalt Psychology. Along with Kurt Koffka and Wolfgang Kohler, he is known for his book Productive Thinking and for conceiving the pi phenomenon as part of his work in Gestalt Psychology. Now let's understand what is pi phenomenon. Max Wertheimer began the formal founding of Gestalt Psychology in 1910 as he began experiments on the pi phenomenon. He published these experiments in a paper titled Experimental Studies on the Perception of Movement. The pi phenomenon is apparent movement caused by alternating light positions. Wertheimer illustrated this phenomenon on an apparatus he built that utilized two discrete lights on different locations. Although the lights are stationary, flashing the lights at succeeding time intervals causes the retina to perceive the light as moving. Wertheimer worked with partners Koffka and Kohler to collect data, which ultimately led to their launch of the Gestalt movement. Their findings further demonstrated that the quality of the whole is different from the sum of the parts. The explanation of the pi phenomena was that movement is perceived because the eye itself moves in response to the successive flashes of light. The movement an observer experiences is based on feedback from the moving eye. The researchers maintained that human perception is prone to such illusions, and they speculated that it is more meaningful to connect close together events than to keep them artificially separate. Now let's understand what is productive thinking. As a Gestalt theorist, Max Wertheimer was interested in perception but additionally interested in thought. Max published his ideas in his book Productive Thinking before his death in 1943. Wertheimer was interested in making a distinction between reproductive thinking and productive thinking. Reproductive thinking is associated with repetition, conditioning, habits, or familiar intellectual territory. Productive thinking is the product of new ideas and breakthroughs. Productive thinking is insight-based reasoning. Wertheimer argued that only insightful reasoning could bring true understanding of conceptual problems and relationships. Wertheimer encouraged training in traditional logic. He believed traditional logic stimulated thinking. However, he believed that logic alone did not give rise to productive thinking. He believed creativity was also crucial to engage in positive thinking. In productive thinking, similar to his lectures, Wertheimer used concrete examples to illustrate his principles. Wertheimer used these illustrations to demonstrate the transition from S1, a state where nothing really seems to make sense, to S2, where everything seems clear and the concept grasped. He points out in productive thinking that solving a problem by blind obedience to rules prevents a real understanding of the problems. He believes that this blind obedience forestalls a person from uncovering the solution. Max Wertheimer's ideas of productive thinking are of continuing relevance in modern ideas of schemas, plans, and knowledge structures today. Gestalt Psychology, school of psychology founded in the 20th century that provided the foundation for the modern study of perception. Gestalt theory emphasizes that the whole of anything is greater than its part. that is, the attributes of the whole are not deducible from analysis of the parts in isolation. The word Gestalt is used in modern German to mean the way a thing has been placed or put together. There is no exact equivalent in English. Form and shape are the usual translations. In psychology, the word is often interpreted as pattern or configuration. Gestalt theory originated in Austria and Germany as a reaction against the associationist and structural schools, atomistic orientation, an approach which fragmented experience into distinct and unrelated elements. Gestalt studies made use instead of phenomenology. This method, with a tradition going back to John Wolfgang von Goethe, involves nothing more than the description of direct psychological experience with no restrictions on what is permissible in the description. Gestalt psychology was in part an attempt to add a humanistic dimension to what was considered a sterile approach to the scientific study of mental life. Gestalt psychology further sought to encompass the qualities of form, meaning, and value that prevailing psychologists had either ignored or presumed to fall outside the boundaries of science. The publication of Czech-born psychologist Max Wertheimer's Experimentelle Studien über das Sehen von Bogen, Experimental Studies of the Perception of Movement, in 1912, marks the founding of the Gestalt school. In it, Wertheimer reported the result of a study on apparent movement conducted in Frankfurt am Main, Germany, with psychologists Wolfgang Kohler and Kurt Kofka. Together, these three formed the core of the Gestalt school for the next few decades. By the mid-1930s, all had become professors in the United States. The earliest Gestalt work concerned perception with particular emphasis on visual perceptual organization as explained by the phenomenon of illusion. In 1912, Wertheimer discovered the pi phenomenon, an optical illusion in which stationary objects shown in rapid succession, transcending the threshold at which they can be perceived separately, appear to move. The explanation of this phenomenon, also known as persistence of vision and experienced when viewing motion pictures, provided strong support for Gestalt principles. Major elaborations of the new formulation occurred within the next decades. Wertheimer, Kohler, Kofka, and their students extended the Gestalt approach to problems in other areas of perception, problem solving, learning, and thinking. The Gestalt principles were later applied to motivation, social psychology, and personality, particularly by Kurt Lewin, and to aesthetics and economic behavior. Wertheimer demonstrated that Gestalt concepts could also be used to shed light on problems in ethics, political behavior, and the nature of truth. Gestalt psychology's traditions continued in the perceptual investigations undertaken by Rudolf Wertheimer and Hans Walasch in the United States. Now let's understand what is Gestalt theory. Along with Kohler and Kofka, Max Wertheimer was one of the principal proponents of Gestalt theory, which emphasized higher order cognitive processes in the midst of behaviorism. The focus of Gestalt theory was the idea of grouping, that is, characteristics of stimuli cause us to structure or interpret a visual field or problem in a certain way. The primary factors that determine grouping were: number one, proximity. Elements tend to be grouped together according to their nearness. For example, whatever the elements are there, nearly matched, they are grouped in one, that is proximity. Then similarity. items similar in some respect tend to be grouped together. That means whatever items are little similar, they are grouped together. Then closure. Items are grouped together if they tend to complete some entity. Then simplicity. Items will be organized into simple figures according to symmetry, regularity and smoothness. These factors were called the laws of organization and were explained in the context of perception and problem solving. Excuse me. Wertheimer was especially concerned with problem solving. Wertheimer provides a Gestalt interpretation of problem solving episodes of famous scientists, example Galileo, Einstein, as well as children presented with mathematical problems. The essence of successful problem solving behavior according to Wertheimer is being able to see the overall structure of the problem. A certain region in the field becomes crucial is focused, but it does not become isolated. A new, deeper structural view of the situation develops involving changes in functional meaning, the grouping, etc. of the items. Directed by what is required by the structure of a situation for a crucial region, one is led to a reasonable production which, like the other parts of the structure, calls for verification, direct or indirect. Two directions are involved: getting a whole consistent picture and seeing what the structure of the whole requires for the parts. Now let's understand the application of Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory applies to all aspects of human learning, although it applies most directly to perception and problem solving. The work of Gibson was strongly influenced by Gestalt theory. Now let's understand through example. The classic example of Gestalt principles provided by Wertheimer is children finding the area of parallelograms. As long as the parallelograms are regular figures, a standard procedure can be applied. That means making lines perpendicular from the corners of the base. However, if a parallelogram with a novel shape or orientation is provided, the standard procedure will not work and children are forced to solve the problem by understanding the true structure of a parallelogram. That is, the figure can be bisected anywhere if the ends are joined. Now let's understand the principles. The learner should be encouraged to discover the underlying nature of a topic or problem, that is, the relationship among the elements. Gaps, incongruities or disturbances are an important stimulus for learning. Instruction should be based upon the laws of organization, that is, proximity, closure, similarity and simplicity. Now let's conclude the topic. Wertheimer developed his Gestalt theory in 1910 while he was on board a train from Vienna for a vacation in Germany's Rhineland. Gestalt, in the closest English definition of the term, is translated potentially as configuration, form, holistic, structure and pattern. According to Gestalt psychology, perception is a whole. In this sense, perception can shape vision and the other senses. In addition, the theory also maintained that the whole is not only greater than its components, but also different from those components. By 1920, Wertheimer added the position that the properties of any parts are governed by the structural laws of the whole. Later efforts to discover such laws had limited success. Wertheimer's work on Gestalt psychology with his colleagues at the New School was seen as an opposition and alternative to the behavioral approach to psychology. Wertheimer started the cognitive school of psychology. His ideas also challenged structuralism and atomism, in that he and other Gestalt psychologists were more concerned about the whole rather than small structures or fragments of an object. So we come to the end of the session. Thanks for your attention and time. As motivation, please do like, share, subscribe and comment below. Happy learning!